Hello and welcome to this presentation. I am Jean-Baptiste, but people call me JDB. That's much more easier. I'm French. I'm the co-founder and CEO of WP Media, which is the company behind WP Rocket, our caching plugin, web performance plugin for WordPress. We have also Imagify and Rocket CDN. Today, the idea is to present you some information about web performance. The idea for me is to explain you a few things about web performance because unfortunately, and maybe fortunately for us, web performance is not really known. There are a lot of information, but sometimes, it's a bit complex. Web performance is a bit complex, not that much complex, but in order for you to understand correctly web performance and how at the end, you can make your website faster, you need to understand a few things and a few basic technical things. So that's where we're going to go into that presentation. I'm briefly going to talk about core web vitals as well, which is pretty important these days, let's say. And I'm going to show you a few practical things on how you can improve your performance on your WordPress website. So let me start presenting sharing my screen. That should work, hopefully. So very quickly, our biggest product, let's say, is WP Rocket. And today we have more than 4 million websites using WP Rocket. So it's, in other words, we have one new website every 40 seconds, which is added to WP Rocket. We have been seeing a phenomenal growth since many years, and we have learned a few things about running this amount of website with one plugin, and we have been learning a few things about web performance as well, because that's really the core of what we do. All the time, when we are talking about web performance these days, all the time people are talking about core web vitals, because the classic way of doing things is you have websites, you want to test the web performance, so you are going to test through Google page speed, which is going to talk about core web vitals, which is extremely interesting, extremely technical, I would say, at a point, but that's not necessarily the most important things to know about web performance, because, and that's going to be my point, it's really most important to know and to apply the basics of web performance, which would have a big impact on core web vitals, instead of just focusing on core web vitals and not necessarily understanding what it means at the end. So my first things would be to let's talk first about basics of web performance, and more importantly is how Google has changed, let's say, his vision, or let's say the way they measure and they display, they show if a website is performant or not. So a long time ago, when we started WP Rocket in 2014, Google was more or less only measuring good practice. So they have their page speed score, and at that point, page speed score was only measuring good practices. And when I mean good practices, they were measuring, like, for example, the number of requests you have on a website, what are the image formats you have, what is your cache policy, do you have JZip compression, but there were no measuring at all the real performance of the website at that point, which was like how much time a website takes to load, or what is the perception of the performance of a website. They were only measuring good practices. And on our vision, that was pretty bad, because you could have like super perfect websites with only good practice implemented, so not that much number of requests, great image formats, you had JZip compression, you had everything that was Google measuring at that point. So technically you have like 100 in terms of score, but your website could have been super slow, like taking forever to load because your PHP code, let's say, was super bad. And you could have almost 100% performance score with a website which would take like 10 seconds to load. And we have been quite vocal about, and directly also to our customers, that they shouldn't care about web performance score. But fortunately, web performance score has changed, and now they are way more interesting to measure on our vision. And so slowly, so we've been very vocal about that. I think you can find a lot of blog posts and a lot of communication we did about how bad Google PageSpeed was at the time. Today, it's way more better, and it's really good today. And with time, I mean, Google has been moving when measuring performance of websites. They have been adding real metrics, like the metrics of a website. So they use first the FCP and the TTFB. So the FCP is how much, and they were measuring how much time the first content of a website is being displayed. So basically, when you have something displayed on a screen, because at the time, like the way we were badly creating website is like your website was like white, and you wait like 2 seconds, and after everything was loaded, poof, it was displaying everything, which now has changed quite a lot. So they were displaying in how much time the border is able to display something, like a header, an image, whatever. And the TTFB is basically, so the time to first byte is basically how much time like the server is answering the website. And so the TTFB is how much the server is answering the request. And so we've been that change being introduced by Google by adding more real metrics. Let's say, and with time they finally move to user experience, which is great and core vital. So the user experience is exactly what you should target for your user. Is like a user visiting a website. What is the perception of the speed, what is being displayed on the website in how much time, and that's where the performance goes now, is like we obviously try to improve everything, but we try to improve everything which is directly displayed to the user in his browser. Everything which is above the fold, which is displayed directly, we try to super optimize to display it as soon as possible. And everything which is below the fold, we don't care in a way, because the user don't really see it right away because he had to scroll. So we can catch when the user is scrolling in order to display a lot of things. So that's what we try, and what the whole performance move is trying to optimize what is directly displayed to the user and try to predict what the user is going to see next in order to preload, pre-render this kind of stuff. And so more than just talking about theoretical things, I believe you are here in order to get information about how you can have practical solution for your WordPress, because usually the classic way is like you have created a WordPress website, and I don't know, maybe so you're an agency and your customer is saying, hey, I don't have 100% on page speed, or it looks like my website is slow. How can I do it? And so there are a few things that we're going to talk. I believe the first really extremely important thing, and it's really the basic, is like the hosting. Because you can have a perfect website in terms of optimization. It can be super light, optimized, but if your hosting is really bad, this will never work, never. So that would be my very first recommendation, is make sure to choose the proper hosting. And it's a two things to choose. Is first the proper company who is going to host your website. So we don't have really specific recommendation, except that don't go to really low cost hosting. And also the other thing is make sure that the package you are taking, so the plan you are taking on your hosting is according to the number of visits you have. Because you can have a great hosting company, but if you are taking the super low package, the first package, but you have a high traffic website and big websites, that will never work. So first, make sure about that. Then there are a lot of things that people are talking is, does number of plugins affect the performance of my website? So answer is yes and no. I mean, if you have 1,000 plugins which does nothing to your website, I mean, who don't add new JavaScript file, let's say, or doesn't have impact on the front end of your website, this won't have any kind of impact or very minimal impact on the performance of our website. But with only 1 or 2 plugins, which would bring tons of JavaScript, tons of PHP, tons of database requests that would impact very negatively the website. So the wise things to do regarding number of plugins is trying to reduce as much as possible. I mean, to really think about, okay, if you don't need right now this plugin, just disable it and delete it, because in most of the case that would have an impact on the performance of your website. And sometimes you can, like, if you have the ability to code some things, and which is a very small need, and maybe a plugin can answer that need, that might worth it to really directly integrate on your side and to code what is needed, versus like having a plugin who do tons of other things, but which would have an impact about performance. And that's the thing about web performance is mostly a question of balance. But okay, all the features or all the things I'm going to add to my website is going necessarily to impact my performance. So what should we do and how we can optimize what we have? The other things we necessarily recommend is a caching plugin. I'm going to talk specifically about caching plugin, but honestly, it's really necessary. So we have WP Rocket, but there are tons of other solutions which are great outside. And in any case, I would recommend a caching plugin. And that's our way to go is, as soon as you have a WordPress website, make sure to have a caching plugin. And especially because now caching plugin don't do only caching, but all the web performance optimization, which is necessary for your users, for Google. So yeah, it's like necessary. The other thing is image optimization. It's really super simple to have. We do provide Imagify, which allow you to optimize a few images per month for free. And then if you need more, you can pay for more usage. And it's really also necessary because I think 60% of the size of a page is just images. So if you're able to reduce the size of these images without reducing the quality, which is what we do, it's just a win for you, for how much image you store, and for your users, because that's going to make the load way more faster. The last thing, I mean, there are way more other things, but the last thing that I'm going to quickly talk about is CDN. Lots of people think that CDN is really necessary. That's wrong. So for the people who don't know, CDN is a way to store all the assets, the static assets of your website. So static asset is mostly like images, CSS, JavaScript on your website everywhere on the world. So that's very useful because technically a website is hosted in a certain point geographically speaking. So let's say my website is in Paris, a visitor in Paris or in France, the distance is really small, so everything is loading super fast. But let's say now I've user from US, and US from Paris is taking a bit of time. So that would be way more interesting to have point of presence of my assets directly in US. So that's what a CDN is providing. But if you are like in Europe and most of the visitors are in Europe, no need to have a CDN. However, as soon as you have international, or if you're in US, because US is way more bigger than Europe, that's probably needed. So there are a lot of information about, and I mean, a lot of question, a lot of content about what is caching, and most of the people don't really know what is caching, and the fact is there are different kind of cache, which makes things way more complex for people to understand. So I'm going to first trying to introduce what is caching in the global sense, and then we're going to quickly go into the details of every kind of caching we can have into our websites. So the definition of caching is really simple, and I'm going to give you a practical example. So, I mean, we're not in live, so no one is going to be able to answer that question. But let's imagine we are in live, and I'm going to ask what is the result of 95 multiplied by 26. No one probably will know, and people will open the phone, check the calculation, do the calculation on their calculation app, and provide the answer. And it will take probably 20 seconds. And if a few seconds after I'm going to re-ask that question again, people will be able to give that answer in like 1 second because they do remember immediately what is the answer of that. However, if I'm going to ask in 2 weeks, we would do to the same process. So that's exactly what is caching. So caching is, the definition of caching is store temporary an information. And usually the information is like something which need calculation, which takes times to generate. So you see the information, you see the value of caching is sometimes we always do the same calculation and we don't technically need to redo that calculation because sometimes it may change like once a day. But if we have like hundreds of visitors in the same hours doing the exact same calculation, that doesn't make sense to redo it again. So we say, okay, let's keep that information for 1 hour or 1 day, or it's on our side to define, and then display it directly. And so now that I hope that you understand what is cache, I mean the pure definition of cache, let's say. So I'm going to repeat it again: store temporary and information. We're going to see how this does imply websites and how we can what we do on website regarding caching, and we'll see how much different kind of cache we have. There are way more that I'm going to present, but for the simplicity of this presentation, the timing of this presentation, I'm going to just present a few one. So the first one is browser cache. So as the name suggests, this is a cache which is stored directly on your browser, on the borders of all the visitors of a specific website. So it's easy to understand, hopefully, way more, and it's super simple to set up. So basically, the idea, it's the server, so where your website is hosted, when he's going to deliver files, so let's say in images, he's going to put a specific headers on the images to give instruction to the browser to say, you need to store this file for a specific time. So usually we say like, okay, keep this file, keep these images into your memory, so into the browser cache for like 60 days, because I mean, we are delivering an image with a specific name, and we don't expect the image with this specific name to change. So there is no reason for the browser to just all the time ask the server the image again. So, but this may change. So that's why usually we don't put unlimited time. So we say, okay, during 60 days, keep it into your cache, into the browser cache, and don't ask the server again, which is a big win for everyone because it's directly on the browser, so it's displayed automatically. There is no bandwidth consumed, there is no server consumption. So it's very effective. So this can be done only for like what we call static assets again. So images, CSS, JavaScript. And what you need to understand, which is extremely important, is the way it's stored. It's a bit more complex, but to make things simpler, let's say. So when you use a storage system, it's what we call usually a key and a value. So the key is the name. So that's where the browser is going to ask the content of the image. So let's say we have an image on a website, because it's really per website, the cache, which is called like test.jpg. So test.jpg is a key, and the value is like the content of the image itself. And so the browser will say, okay, the browser will say, okay, do I have test.jpg into my browser cache for this specific website? Yes, I have it, so I'm going to display it. But you might understand this may be an issue. Let's imagine you are going to upload a new image called test.jpg, which is accessible in the exact same URL, but you are going to upload a new image. Usually this happens mostly for like style. So let's imagine you change the style of your website, the CSS of your website, and you have the name called style.css, and you just change the content and you put on your server, and you don't understand why your browser don't see the reflection, because that's simply because of cache. And that's why usually people say, hey, have you cleared the cache? And that's because of that, because the name is exactly the same, style.css. The value has changed, but the browser doesn't know that the value has changed. The content of the file has changed. So he will keep it into the browser for like 60 days, depending on the instruction we have given. And that's where, but we have a solution for that. We can simply change a little bit the name. So for that, we use versioning. So since the name is changed, the browser won't have into his cache anymore. So that's why usually, when you do change into like style.css or any kind of file, you put at the end like what we call a query string, which is like interrogation mark version something. So I'm going to write it to make it easier. So usually you are going to load something which is something 1. So which means that let's say that's the version 1. This can be anything we want. So as soon as you do some change into the style.css, you're going to change this number. So the browser has a new file, so a new key. So he's going to generate to not have into his browser cache anymore. So that's the trick, let's say, we're using. However, this trick can't be used for HTML. I mean, the full HTML, because it doesn't technically has a name, so you can't change it, which means that it's extremely important to never cache the full HTML. I mean, I'm talking specifically about browser cache because we have all the way of caching that. So this is extremely easy to set up. It's just a few instructions you give to your server. Usually that goes to the HTXS or Nginx rules. And I would say at least WP Rocket, but most of all the caching plugins do. Everything is automatic as soon as you enable, for example, WP Rocket. We put the good instruction for the browser, or if you're using a CDN, that's usually the same. The second cache I'm going to talk about is like static cache. Static cache is what usually has the biggest impact in terms of performance. So you need to understand how WordPress website is working. I mean, when let's say you are going to display the homepage of a WordPress website. So the browser is requesting a specific page, and WordPress through PHP and MySQL, we say, okay, this user is asking the homepage. Is this user connected? If not, we are going to display something different. Okay, we need to get all the content of the homepage. We do a lot of calculation. We do a lot of MySQL database, let's say, request. And then we display the content. And this takes forever if you want something extremely fast. I mean, usually like 2 or 3 seconds or a bit less probably. But it's too much, and usually, like your home page, if you're not connected, is always the same. So it doesn't by nature have to be dynamic. So the idea of static cache and what does WP Rocket and all the caching plugin is just take all the HTML which is generated by WordPress and store it directly. So this is a cache. We are storing it. And when another user is visiting the website, we simply show the cache directly, so the HTML which has been rendered. So there are no more PHP, there are no more MySQL, and we are simply serving a simple HTML file, which takes like probably, 50 milliseconds to serve it. So that's a huge impact on it. What is hard then is to like making sure the cache is properly cleared, because if you update some content, if you update your WordPress, this needs to be updated. So that's a big work of the caching plugin, making sure to clear everything which is needed. Another thing you can implement, so it's really more for the developers, is WP Cache, because WordPress has native cache. So it's simply like a function, let's say, which allow you to store specific information without like creating specific database entries. And so for that, there are two main things. The first thing is object cache. But object cache is very, very specific. And my advice is most of the time, don't use it. Unless you really know what you do. So basically, the object cache will store only for the time of a request the data that you have set. So you can use mostly, there are other functions, but the main one are like WP cache set, where you put information into the cache with a key and the data and how much it should expire, and WP cache get to retrieve the data. However, this storage is extremely ephemeral, because as soon as you refresh a page, basically the storage has been deleted. So it's really not needed. So there are very specific use cases if you are inside a function to have access outside. But if you're a developer, basically it's using global. So if you are outside of the scope of the functions that allow you to retrieve it without recalculating. But as you understand, that's really not necessarily needed. However, there is a great solution, which is you can delegate the store of the cache to not having directly into the PHP memory, but to having into Redis or Memcache or whatever, and you have specific plugin for that. I think there is Redis cache, something like that, which allow you to store the content of WP cache, which is extremely efficient, and which allow you to have a real cache with real expiration that you can set. And the other thing which is mostly used is transients. So it's a way to store something very specific into the database. So usually you can use transient to like store the value of a calculation you have done into the database. For example, a very real example of how we're using it is, so for example, on WP Rocket homepage, we're displaying the number of websites that is using WP Rocket. In order to have that, so basically into our database, we are using website is a custom post type. And in order to like having the full numbers of website, we simply ask WordPress how much entries do we have into these custom post types. This takes a lot of time because there are some big MySQL requests to do that, because we do some exclusion in the same time. And so the good solution in order to do that is like to do it once and to save the answer, like this number of websites, directly into a transient. So for that, we use set transient and get transients. At the end, it's stored into the database, but it's only one small request, and you don't have to do the whole calculation. So make sure, like, if you do kind of calculation like database request or external request, let's say you are fetching some data from an external API, it's really a good idea to store the answer, the results, directly into a transient. So I initially wanted to go very quickly into Core Vitals. The thing is, I'm out of time. So I'm voluntarily skipping the Core Vitals because I don't want to just present in 2 minutes, because that requires more time. So maybe I can do a specific talk about what is Core Vitals, but just a few advice. So let's say you have a website and you want to make it faster. And I mean, you done a few things. You have installed the caching plugins. You did a few things. And you want to know how you can make it faster. So basically you are going to do a Core Vital score or PageSpeed score, which would give you the Core Vitals. My advice is do it. It's extremely important to measure what you do to see the results of that. And way more important is not just check the score, because the score is important, but what is important is what is PageSpeed giving you as advice, as recommendation, because this will help you understand what is specifically wrong into my website and how I can address that. Because if you just have the number, you won't know what you can do. So make sure to read all the PageSpeed with report, and specifically all the details. It's extremely important. not necessarily related to the core web vitals, but as a main things to improve the performance of your website is making sure you use web performance, making sure to clean your WordPress. By cleaning your WordPress, making sure that you don't store too much information, and if the things you store which is not needed, make sure that you delete them. Make sure that you don't have multiple plugins who do the same thing. Make sure to use only one plugin for the same things. I mean, might sounds weird, but I've seen website with like probably 3 or 4 contact form enabled in the same time, but they're using only one. However, the 3 contact form was directly putting their JavaScript and their CSS in all the pages, so which was not used. So there is really no point of doing that. Make sure to use web performance plugin. I mean, it can be WP Rocket. There are plenty of other solutions, but it's really necessary. It's really not good to use WordPress without a web performance plugin. Not because of WordPress, but because of all the themes, everything you are going to add at the end. If you take blank WordPress with official themes, probably you don't necessarily need it, even if that would bring some improvements. But as soon as you have specific things, you really need it. And last thing is making sure that you optimize your images. It's really simple to do. It's really cheap to do. Doesn't have any kind of negative impact. It's a no-brainer to do. So make sure you do it. And that's more or less all. I mean, there are tons of things you should do for improving your web performance. There are things on the back end, on the server optimization. There are things on the PHP optimization, how you code specific things. The big thing as well is like front-end optimization. So it's a big subject, and if you want, like, let's say a perfect website, all this should be covered. And usually, I mean, depending on your research, but it's pretty hard to do. So making sure that to cover everything you can with web performance plugin, or like having, if you are a developer or if you do hire developer, making sure that they are aware about good practices regarding web performance in the globality, making sure that you can train them, you can give them information. There are plenty of good information about web performance. So yeah, training is really necessary. Go to specific performance webinar in order to learn new things, and I hope that you did learn new things. So thanks a lot for watching it. I hope that you did enjoy, you did learn a few things. Was super happy to do that. So thanks for the invitation, and see you very soon.